Hello, hello. Good morning or good afternoon, actually. Everyone. We're so excited to be here today for our Toddler Nap workshop. I'm in great company today with Dr. Monica Orway. She will introduce herself in a minute as we wait for few of you that are sort of trickling in as we go. Just a reminder, today we're going to talk about all things naps, about toddlers. The goal of today is really for you guys to leave here empowered and feeling reassured that you're doing a great job because I'm sure you all are. But we want really to give you some tools and tips and tricks to navigate these years more smoothly. Please join the chat. Tell us more about your kids. We want to know how old they are. Where are you, connecting from? The more we know about you, the better, we are going to be able to address all your questions. We also have a little document that you can download and, take notes on, and as just so that you can, keep some of the things that we have discussed today and then go over it in the next weeks or so. And so there's a Q&A box that where you guys can drop off your questions that also just work through the chat. I'm going to try to keep an eye on both as we move along. So I see we have a 30-month-old, a 16-month-old, and I'm sure we're going to hear more from you as we move along. So to kick things off, let me introduce myself. I am Maristella Lucchini. I'm a sleep expert and I've been working at Nanit for 3 years now. And today I'm joined by Dr. Monica Ordway, a good friend and an amazing scientist in clinicians. And so, Monica, do you want to say a couple of words about your work and who you are?
Sure. So I'm Monica Ordway. I am a pediatric nurse practitioner and an associate professor in research and focusing on early childhood sleep and intervention development. And I'm also on the medical and scientific advisory board for Nanit. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And before we dive into all the great topics that we're going to talk about today, I just wanted to remind you that we have a great giveaway for Nanny Sound the Line. So stay tuned. And then at the end of our workshop, we'll share who will be the lucky winner. So just to give sort of a big overview of what we're going to talk about today, we know that toddlers' years are tricky. There's a lot of transitions. Some kids are getting ready to move from 2 to 1 nap. Some of these kids are getting ready to actually drop a nap, and a whole new phase of your life is opening up where no more naps are going to be present. And so we just want to sort of walk through some of these big changes, also changes in beds, going from a crib to a toddler bed. What are some of the tool and the tricks that you can use to make this transition smoother? And so I want to start off with, especially because I see that we have 30 months old, 16 months old, so we're probably in that phase of the 2 to 1 nap transition. And so I think something that sometimes is hard for parents is to understand when is your baby ready. We know that there are some windows of age when babies are starting to get ready. But can we, Monica, maybe share something about what are the things that parents should be on the lookout for when they're getting ready for this transition? And then what is the best way to make this transition happen?
I mean, I think that some of this is sort of a natural, like kind of take the lead of your child, but also knowing that naps are common and are typical. And our recommendations of sleep health, for example, the sleep duration recommendations we provide are inclusive of naps until age 5. And so I think it's looking at when your child is ready to drop that nap is sort of usually it's a morning nap, where I don't know if that's what you're finding, Maricela,
Yeah.
but from clinically I would see that more the morning nap and transitioning to that early afternoon nap.
Yeah.
And so maybe one of the things I think my biggest piece of advice is trying to keep some consistency to the nap if you can, and try to have it not go too late in the afternoon, like after 3-ish. I just find that in both the data that I see when I'm collecting data on sleep is that kind of can push the bedtime a little bit later. So Yeah, I don't know what other ideas you have, Maricel,
Yeah.
about.
So usually I would say, that typical window of that change would be right after they turn one. So like 13 to 15 months is sort of a sweet spot. And again, we're talking about on average. So as Monica was saying, sort of follow the lead of your child. Sometimes it's something that we can have naturally, but sometimes it's also maybe there's like a daycare setting where at some ages sort of move them to a particular nap. And so we kind of have to make that adjustment. One thing that I want to say is that very often it's not like a sudden change. There might be a period of adjustment where they take that one nap, but then maybe they don't stretch it long enough, and so they just sleep, I don't know, 45 minutes for that middle of the day nap, and then they're a little tired. So there could be some cat naps here and there as they make these transitions. But as Monica was saying, trying to avoid for them to sleep too late in the afternoon, just so that we want them to build enough sleep pressure so that when bedtime comes, they're gonna be tired and they're not gonna push bedtime too late and then sort of create this vicious cycle where they don't get enough sleep at night and then they are overtired during the day. And so, yes, so this idea of making something that is a little bit gradual, offering this sort of bridge naps, and then sort of follow the lead of your child. I see a question say our son usually takes 1 hour nap at 11:30 a.m. to 12 p.m., but lately he's only sleeping an hour to an hour and a half. Should his nap be later to have a longer nap? He's transitioned to one nap around 13 to 14 months. I would say, maybe, I don't know what's the wake up time, but I do think, as Monica was saying, that usually that middle of the day where they've built enough sleep pressure from the time that they've woken up to when they go take a nap, that might help to sort of stretch that sleep period a little longer.
Yeah, I would just
Um,
add, Maricela, too, that if you're noticing what you were saying about the cat naps, Maricela, and I think that if you have a day like that, just be aware that you might find that they're a little more cranky or irritable in the evening. And I would go ahead and like mentally prepare yourself for about a half hour to an hour earlier bedtime. Because that when they start to get sort of cranky like that, it's usually that they're overtired. And so you might want to be thoughtful, not just about the naps, but also might have to shift by half hour or so earlier the bedtime. And 11:30 to 12:30 or 12 to 1, I think that's fine if your child's getting enough, nighttime sleep. I don't know that we have any evidence to suggest that a longer nap versus a shorter nap, any definitive empirical like research to suggest that one is more beneficial than the other. I think it's more the general sort of duration,
Yeah. Yeah,
24 hours.
exactly. What is important, I would say, sort of take into account how much they sleep during the night, putting together how much they sleep during the day, and sort of seeing if we get into the ballpark of what it would be recommended for this age. And the other thing is also observing your child. Like I have three children, and something that I've noticed is that, um, both, from my experience and then in the research is that we give ranges because not every kid is going to need exactly those like 13 hours a day, right? It could be between, 13 to 14 hours and it can be distributed differently. And so observing your child, how they're behaving, if they're always very cranky, if they're always seem sleepy, if that also going to tell you, is my child getting enough sleep? As long as we stay, in the general range of what is required at this age. What do you think, Monica?
I think that's such an important point. Like the normal range that we say is like you said the transition at 13 to 14, but between 1 and 2, we would say 11 to 14 hours of 24 hours sleep.
That's a 3 hours
11 to 14.
difference.
Yeah. And so, if you have one of those children who is 11 hours and your sister has a similar age child that's 14 hours, it's really hard to hear from your sister about how,
And
or
a
your best
3 hour
friend,
nap.
how they're getting this, their child sleeps 14 hours. There's no, that is a normal range, 11 to 14, meaning that there is nothing to indicate that her child's going to go to Harvard and your child's not, that because they're getting more sleep or any kind of,
Yeah. And
situation.
I'm just coming from the newborn nap workshop, and where we talked a lot about, getting to know your child. And I think, this is one of the situations where they're not gonna come with like an instruction manual saying your child is an 11-hour child and that our child is it's 14 hours. You're gonna have to see how they behave, and you're gonna pick up and see like, well, they're always cranky. They might need to go to bed a little earlier, or they're really struggling to stay emotionally regulated, or it's something that observing and getting to know your child, you will slowly adjust this need that they have for sleep. And so something really big, another big transitions that happen around this age is around the sleep space. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what sleep safety looks like once we enter in the toddler years, like meaning that, for that first year of life, everybody's really focused on ensuring, that we want to create a safe sleep space to prevent SIDS. Now we have reached a big landmark. After your child is one, things change a bit, but there's still a lot of attention that we want to pose on, creating a safe sleep environment. And then thinking about sleep environment, that a lot of children around this age do move from a crib to a toddler bed. And, from everybody who's in the webinar right now, feel free to jump in the chat, share us what's your sleep space like for your toddler, and if you have any specific questions about this type of transitions. But as we wait for our friends to let us know their situations, do you want to start to provide a little bit of a general background on this topic, Monica?
Sure. I would say that generally we would recommend that a child can stay in their crib safely until age 3, provided that they're not climbing out, actively climbing out of the crib. Um, and when I say that, I'm emphasizing climbing out because that doesn't mean they're going to stand up. They may even try to lift their leg. So as they're exploring all of their developmental milestones, they practice them a lot during quiet time in their crib, and sometimes they even practice them. It's normal for children this age to have at least around 6 nighttime wakings, micro arousals, and sometimes those micro arousals might be a little more alert. They don't need anything, but they're just going to maybe practice standing up or sitting up, or trying to pull themselves up. But I would say, unless you think there's really a risk of them jumping out, I would say don't be afraid to keep them in there as long as you can for up to age 3, is typically what we
Yeah,
would.
and I see that most of our friends connected, they have their children in their crib, and I think it. We were talking yesterday as we were preparing the workshop, and it's really important to know that around this age, they're still sort of learning what it means to follow instructions. And so sometimes, moving them out of the crib too early can be really tricky for them. Like they are not going to do it on purpose that they're going to leave the crib. They don't have this concept of understanding the consequences of their action as well. So if possible, keeping them in the crib can actually be a great things for them to learn those skills before, and then be moved out to bed when they're sort of ready for that transition to happen. And we have some questions about teaching independent sleep skill around this time, and I do think it's somewhat connected to the questions about crib and bed, because definitely once they are in a toddler bed, it might be harder a bit to teach the skills. What are your thoughts on that, Monica?
Oh yeah, I think if they haven't learned to fall asleep independently in the crib, once you put them in a bed, you can pretty much guarantee that they're going to be getting out of that bed and coming to you. So I would, you know, try to get them to sleep, to fall asleep independently. Um, assuming that you have that, I think sometimes if you're sharing a room, it can be a bit of a challenge. And in that case, I still recommend that the parent would be out of the room, and then when the child falls asleep, going back into the room for their own
Yeah.
sleep period. But yeah, I think
And I
that.
think, this is an age where it's totally appropriate for them to be learning how to sleep independently. So some people do start a little bit earlier in their infancy, but yeah, if for the first year of life, they've they've learned to fall asleep, being rocked or sort of assisted by a parent, this actually is a great time for them to be able to learn slowly and make that transition to be able to fall asleep more independently. Because as you know, as our friend is saying, sometimes otherwise they might wake up in the middle of the night and they're going to need that extra comfort. And so for a parent can be a lot to have to be waken up. And um, they were mentioning like, oh, maybe it could be factors like teething. Actually, we have a great study that we published recently about teething. Yes, there could be some factors that create minimal disruptions, but if the child is always being put to bed, being rocked to sleep, most likely the reason why they fall asleep and they cannot fall back asleep during the night is because of this association. And so teaching them to sleep independently could actually make a huge difference there. And we have another question about how sometimes sleep schedules can be different in daycare versus at home, where they might sleep longer in the daycare, and then once they're home, they sleep less, and then the schedules need to be moved around. So, for example, they sleep 2 hours in daycare, but then when they're home, they sleep 1 to 1 hour and a half, no longer than that. So they have to adjust the schedule. And my take on that is that that's completely normal. The environment is completely different. In daycare, they're surrounded by kids asleep. There's no other distractions, and so that seems to me as again as something completely normal. And but I don't know, what's your take on it, Monica?
Yeah, I don't know if you said, or is it just a lost cause? Like I would, just reframe it for you. Just sort of, it's like accepting that that's probably what's, that you're not going to probably be able to change that too much. Maybe if you've tried some white noise, likely it's they're sleeping longer in the daycare just because the environment is such that the lights are out. I mean, I know when my kids were in daycare, it's like the lights went out, they knew they were on their cots, and they did not get out of their cots even if they were awake until the light went on. It didn't matter if everyone was, awake. And so that type of routine is really not possible in most of our homes because we have lives that we're not getting paid like the childcare to have a consistent schedule. And I do think schedules are really important, but you have to live your life too. So
Find the
that's
right balance between
so
the
I
two.
think it's a little bit of acceptance that yep, an hour and a half at home, and that's a good amount of time. And but I think that it could be tied because I think it's the same person who's also talking about that falling asleep alone. So
Yeah,
I think
the
that
their struggles. I think, some questions are related to the fact that maybe during the infancy period, we finally got into the routine when they fall asleep by themselves. But then toddler year comes and things sort of feel like we are regressing back where they need us more. But there are huge developmental changes around this age when they are more aware of your presence. They're more aware of what they can ask and request. So I think, it's normal to have to reestablish new routines around this age, right?
yeah, I would like to share two concepts that I think can be really helpful to families to know. And one is about stress and the developmental purpose and definition of stress. And the other one is to explain why babies and why children wake up at night. So let's start with the stress one. I think people worry about the waking up and screaming or being upset, and are they damaging their child or do they need them more? And from an attachment theory perspective, attachment is typically formed by 12 months of age. So it's the secure attachment is likely already there by this time, and would only really get disrupted by something like a toxic stress. And so definitions of stress are positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress. Not definitions, but there are three types.
Three
And I really
levels.
want to emphasize the positive stress is just that. It's necessary for us to develop, it's necessary for our bones to be stronger by, putting pressure on our bones to create that strength. It's important for children to, learn about the world, to know that that they're going to maybe get a vaccine at the doctor's office, or they're going to have the first day of school, and that those are normal stresses that are normal and help to develop their emotion regulation capacity, their empathy, their empathy, compassion, capacity, because they understanding that things are not going perfectly. And so it's such a, I think people think the word stress and then they think, oh, they're doing something wrong. And I would put under the positive stress, learning how to sleep independently. And then tolerable stress, that's a stress that's um, more longer term, a little bigger, like something like the loss of a pet or a loss of a family member or a move to a new home, something that's a little more significant, but having a family there that's there to support them and help them back in transition, then that stress doesn't get embedded in their body, which is what toxic stress can do. Toxic stress is neglect, abuse. That's the kind of so I think sometimes as parents we get this guilt trips
That's true.
about
Yeah, we get
and
nervous that it's too much, right?
yes, right. And I would say that this is a time, this age of toddlerhood, it is their job to test you. Like that is how they're learning about the world. They can't learn about the world if they're living in like a bubble, and they have to kind of push. And if you watch those, I'm sure with your own child, you see they walk away from you to a certain point and then they stop and they look back. And that's their testing. Like, how far can I go before mom or dad's going to tell me to come back? And similarly with going to bed, and to make yourself feel better, remind yourself that if they ask for a chocolate chip cookie, you might give them one. But if they ask for the second one, the third one, the fourth one, it's
Yes.
really, I think
Yeah.
our public health messaging has been so much about don't overfeed your children. And so we're much more likely to limit their food intake than we are to helping them sleep. Sleep has been a very under recognized pillar of health in our country. And so I think it's something I hope we're helping to reframe. And then go ahead, Marissa. I was going to
No,
just talk.
no, I have another questions that is coming up, but finish your second thought and then
Yeah,
I'll
just the
ask.
night waking one, because I think it can be helpful to understand what happens at night when they wake up by thinking about your own sleep. And to tell you that so when in the sleep clinic, when I have patients that I see order an overnight sleep study for, I want to see that their sleep efficiency, which is the amount of time they're sleeping relative to the amount of time they're awake. That doesn't include the time it took them to fall asleep. It's just the time they're during their sleep and how much time they're awake. I want to see that to be somewhere between 85 and 95%. Anyone that sleeps 95% of the time, I'm worried that they have a hypersomnia disorder. If they're less than 85, that's normal. And I say that because to emphasize that we all wake up during the night. And they're micro arousals that we don't usually remember in the morning because you wake up in your own bed, it's familiar surroundings, your
Turn around and you fall
brain just
asleep
goes
again.
back
Yeah.
off. But if you fall asleep on the couch or if you fall asleep in a hotel, you may be more likely to wake up and have a little conversation with yourself, like, oh, I'm on the couch. Do I go back to my bed? And you have a little and you probably fall asleep fairly easily, but you're definitely more awake. If you're in the hotel, you might be like, oh, I have to give this presentation tomorrow, or I'm visiting my in-laws and I'm so stressed about tomorrow, whatever it is, and you're a lot more likely to wake up. And so if a child is only knows how to fall asleep and their familiar surroundings, your arms or the rocking, then when they wake up, it's like that. It's like they're waking up and they don't know how to put themselves back to sleep. It's just like in the hotel room, but they have more of these. And so oftentimes you'll see that, like I was saying, that sometimes they wake up and they're practicing their um, developmental milestones. They're standing up, things like that. That doesn't mean you need to go to them. Just let
And
them.
there's a few questions about how can toddlers be taught to fall asleep independently, and I think there's more conversation about this maybe during infancy period, but then like either some toddlers they've done great up to a certain time, and then you need to start when they're a little older, or sometimes they go through these sort of regressions of or changes. I think about, for example, at my son, at some point we started daycare, and so things shifted. He was looking, he wanted me more around. And so we had to sort of relearn some of these things. As you were saying, in this framework of a positive stress, there has been a change in your life, and I'm still going to be here, and we're going to learn gradually. and you're gonna learn gradually that it's okay when mom goes away, and then she's gonna come back, right? But maybe we can, spend 2 minutes going over, because it is true that we're talking more about naps, but in general, methods of falling asleep independently can span both at night and during the day. So, do you want to spend like 2 minutes just going over this?
I mean, do you want me to get into like the extinction and graduated extinction or
Yeah, I think like if we could, because there's just so many questions about struggles and falling asleep independently and having to rock, I think it might be helpful because again, it goes both for during the day and night.
yeah. So typically when we talk about sleep training, the main focus when we say sleep training is usually around independent sleeping and helping them to fall asleep on their own. And so there are three sort of primary methods to do that: extinction, graduated extinction, and parental presence. According to like studies that have been done, extinction is the most effective and quickest. Graduated extinction can also be very effective, can just take a little longer. And parental presence is sometimes is a little more 50-50. And so what extinction means is that you have a routine that you build with your family, 20 minutes or so, where you're doing the same thing every night before you get ready for bed, maybe brushing teeth, putting on a pull-up or a diaper or pajamas, maybe reading a, a book or two. And I would just put a little asterisk there to say that decide how many books. Don't get into the habit of like one more, one more, one more. I think reading to your children is amazing and super important, but you might want to do that the hour before bedtime or in the morning or another time. I would stick with a consistent one or two books before bedtime. And then I would like to have like some type of mantra to say as they fall asleep: good night, I love you, I'll see you in the morning. And that's sort of giving them the message that it's nighttime. They have your love and attention, and you'll be there in the morning. And then you leave, and they are awake. Hopefully, you can do this when they're not dysregulated. Like this doesn't work well if they're already having a tantrum, before they go to bed. But so we can try to do it and like when they're sleepy, or ready for bed. And then they may start to cry, yell, scream. And I would encourage you to put like a gate or two gate, like one on top of each other, just to keep them safely in the room. And that can go on for an hour, 2 hours. The first night, the second night, they will cry, sometimes even longer. The third night, much less. And by the fourth night, it's gone. It's done. And it's happy. I think that works really consistently if it's done exactly how I said. If it's done where that first night or the second night, it's like, oh, I just got to go in there for a second and just, that even brief visit is going to start over. And that's when you hear about how they tried, but it took for a long time. What for some families it's easier is graduated extinction, where you do the same routine. Good night, I love you, see you in the morning, and you leave. The child gets upset. Then you wait 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then you go in. Same thing. Good night, I love you, I'll see you in the morning. Don't try not to raise your voice, change your tune, your tone of voice, just kind of a consistent message each time. And you may have to do that over and over again. The next time you'll wait 15 minutes, and then the next time you wait 20 minutes. And so that is what we would call a graduated extinction. The key there is just to be consistent in how you are responding to the child. And the comment about getting frustrated and yelling,
Yeah.
I usually tell parents that that's extremely normal. So like after the third, fourth, fifth time, whatever time 50th time you're getting really frustrated, then I go into your room and grab the pillow off your bed and put your screen. Like it is totally normal to
You
feel
need to let it out on someone else that is not your child.
like you just want your child to only see that sort of. And I will admit that was not my forte. My
Yep.
husband was much better at that. And so sometimes it's just a balance. And then the parental presence is just sort of removing yourself further and further. Like they're in the crib, you're next to the crib or the bed, and then you move yourself, the chair a little further away, and then the next night a little further away until you get to the door. And try not to engage in a conversation.
Yeah.
And
And
we get the question sometimes about, oh, is that too much stress? That's going to elevate their cortisol level. I would, my, there have been studies and there has never been any indication or evidence to suggest that it is at all harmful. And I would flip it to say, we're talking about like doing this for a few nights to maybe a week if it's the graduated extinction, which is a short period of time relative to years of
yeah, of sleep
long
deprivation. Yeah.
and sleep deprivation, right? For both. And so the benefit can outweigh the cost, in my opinion.
Right. And one thing that I would want to highlight is, I mean, there's so much that I would want to share about this, but we only have limited time. But I want to say that one thing that is super important is consistency, meaning that, it's that's one of the key things, that once you decide we're going to start to do this, we really want our child to fall asleep independent, as you were saying, really be consistent with your choice because, and maybe try to even find a time when that is feasible. Like if your in-laws are visiting, maybe this is not the right time to do it. Like, or if you have a big presentation at work that week and you're not going to be emotionally available to do it, maybe that's not a great time. Try to find a time when you're going to be able to devote this energy to it because the first few nights it's going to take it's going to take some work for you to be able to be consistent, to be there, to be calm, be your calm self. And then and the other thing that I want to say is that it's also normal to have this small fluctuations. So if your child was doing great and then all of a sudden daycare starts and they have a couple of days when it's a little harder, it's fine. They've not forgotten all their skills. There's these ups and downs, and so it's not once for all. They're gonna need your assistance, similar to us and adults. You can be a great sleeper and have a couple of nights that are a little harder because something's in your mind, and so don't freak out. Sort of. Um, know that all the things that you're teaching to your children are there. It's just that we are not robot, we are humans, and so we kind of go through these phases. And also, as you were saying, how it's not your forte, it was not your forte to stay calm. Same to me. I was just sharing the story where yesterday my 3.5-year-old told me at bedtime, "Mom, I thought we said we were going to be calm, and I was not my calmest self." And so I was like, "You're right, actually." Yes, I was a little nervous, and that's okay. And we started again. And so even when these things happen, it's not the end of the world. We can always start again. And I see here like a postpartum mom, this the frustration and the sleep deprivation can make us can really take a toll on us. And so I think that's also one of the other reason why it's so important for our children to sleep well. It's important for them, and it's important for us to be able to show up as the parents that we want to be, because when our sleep is consistently interrupted and we don't get enough sleep, and then we have to be up on our feet all day, it's going to be really hard to show up with that love and affection that we have for our children that we want them to feel, right? So that's just to provide some context. Um,
I
and
love
so
what you said, Maricela, about saying, okay, I know mommy wasn't her best, and that's what we would call repair and getting back to the stress thing. So, like for the mom who had said that their child cries himself to sleep next to the gate in the bed, or in the gate in the room. And while that does break your heart, there is that what in the morning you just say that I'm so proud of you. You stayed in your room and you had a good night's sleep, and that's going to help you get big and strong and do well in school, whatever you have to say. But I think that it's to remind you all that there's no perfect parent and we all make mistakes. I have a PhD in parent-child relationships, and I tell you, like, don't look at my parenting, right? Like, I know what the book says to do, but when my kids are now 20 and 23, and they now tell me, like, we're very close, and they tell me about me being a good mom, and they appreciate the consistency that I gave them, and they recognize that I didn't do it perfectly, but it's the repair. Like, so being a good parent is, and from a child development perspective, we say 30% of the time. It doesn't mean 70% of the time that you're a bad parent, that you're intentionally a bad parent. It means that you've accepted that you're not always going to get it right. I mean, it's really hard to know to be in someone else's mind, and let alone a child's mind, to know what their needs and wants. And so in the morning, when you just reassure them and you're present for them, that really makes up for anything that was the night before.
Think that's so important. And we have so many questions. So I want to just talk briefly about one person that said, they've tried extinction, but the child goes out from their toddler bed, and so they kind of fall asleep on the floor. It's I think like it's something that you can help them, support them, maybe bring them back, and then slowly they're gonna learn. I know it's truly hard when you hear your child cry, and I think as Monica was saying, each family sort of needs to find out what's the best method. If you want to do graduate, where you go back, you bring them back to their bed. But I think knowing that for them to learn how to fall asleep can be frustrating, but that frustration and them crying, it's not something that is going to harm them in the long term, is truly a powerful reminder when you go through these phases, so that that yes, it's hard, and you're going to be there for them, you can support them, but it's also hard to learn how to walk. It's also hard to learn how to go from breast milk to solid food. Like, these transitions are really tough, right? And as someone said, I don't want to be the reason why you cry. And I think it's you're not the reason. The reason is that they're learning something new, right? And so your presence is there to reassure them, to know that they're not alone in learning this. And so it's I think the framing of it's really so important. And again, each child is going to have their different timing. Each family is going to have their different solutions, and so that's super important. I want to talk about one quick thing, and then we have one question that I want to answer, which is about the transition from one nap to no naps. Just because I know that a lot of families, sometimes toddlers can start to resist some of the naps, and so families start to wonder, do they need to drop a nap or not? But there's also a component where, like, this resistance is part of being a toddler, and so can we try to provide some guidance about what's their age when we can start to think about it, and how sort of we can look at this transition. So Monica, do you want to?
Oh, you're asking me. Okay.
Yes.
Uh,
Sorry, I was rambling.
that's all right. So that you're talking about the going to no nap.
1 to 0 nap, yes.
Yeah. I mean, and that can vary. Typically, I mean, most children have stopped napping somewhere around like 3 or 4. Like, and even into kindergarten, it's a small number. It's like, I think it's like 10 or 12% would still nap, even going into kindergarten. But our system's not usually open for that. But about 25% will stop around age 3. And so I think the important thing again is just making sure that they are getting a proper amount of sleep at night. And a lot of times people think this doesn't make sense. Something that doesn't make sense intuitively is that putting your child to bed earlier tends to help them fall sleep longer. And meaning that people will sometimes say to me, well, if I put them to bed earlier, they're just going to wake up earlier. Like, they're waking up at 5. And I'll say, actually put them to bed a little bit earlier. And they're shocked to find out if they move the bedtime from, say, like 8:30 to 8 or to 7:30, that they're then sleeping until 6 or 7 in the morning. And so that all has to do with just circadian rhythm and the sleep drive, and the melatonin release, and the number of sleep cycles. So I think that if you're finding that they're not taking a nap during the day, you might need to move that bedtime, closer to like 7:30 if it was previously like 8 or 8:30.
Yeah. And like, again, similar to the transition from 2 to 1, it will not be like all of a sudden. There might still be differences. For example, my child now takes a 30-minute nap at daycare, but then in the weekends he doesn't take naps anymore. And we want to, acknowledge a certain degree of variability, and the fact that things can be a little bit more fluid. There could be that day that you take a car ride and they're going to take an hour nap, and you're going to have to adjust that bedtime. So again, like, we're talking about some ranges, and a little bit of an average situation, acknowledging the fact that things shift a bit. And so before, like, we're sort of getting towards the end. If you have more questions, this is the time to chime in the chat right now. But we have a questions about transitioning from co-sleeping to a more structured sleep. And I think what we talked about before in terms of, you know, independent sleep independency and learning how to initiate sleep by themselves. And, it could be a time where they transition from co-sleeping to a crib in the same room, or they could decide to move it to a different room. But I don't know if you have some thoughts about co-sleeping and how to support a more structured sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on when they're saying more structured. If they mean independent sleep or in a separate bed, then I would say that I would avoid like having them fall asleep in the bed and then moving them, because getting back to like it would be even more shocking for them to wake up in a different place. So I think I like your suggestion, Maricela, of maybe into the crib in your room. So there's parental presence there, and then eventually sort of moving them out to their own room, or just start with their own room and then and go through whether you choose the extinction, graduate extinction, or parental presence. But I just would caution around like not doing that, like fall asleep and then transitioning them, because
Yeah,
that'll be harder.
yeah.
The
And
other thing
yeah,
I
go
would
ahead.
just quick is just that I would add that with all of this, when we were saying about them waking up and the kind of keep it going back in, just as I was saying, the consistent messaging, try to use the same language. And why that's important is because if you say, okay, time to go back to bed, or and then you get into the next time, it's like, all right, I've already been in here 3 times, like it's really time for bed now. And then it's like, if you don't go to bed, we're not going to do that fun thing I said we were going to do tomorrow. Like that just is escalating. Like you're escalating, but it's also escalating for the child. Whereas if they hear consistently, good night, I love you, I'll see you in the morning. Good night, I love you, I'll see you in the morning. And then I'm telling you, go scream in a pillow, but because it is frustrating. But what they're gonna hear, you're being bigger, stronger, wiser, kind when
Yeah,
you're doing that.
yeah.
And there's a difference between discipline and punishment. And what you're teaching your child is discipline, which is really life necessary skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some questions, there's some like thoughts sharing about when there's no more naps that we can have quiet time. And I'm a big believer. I have 3 kids. So there has to be a time, usually it's around after lunchtime, especially in the weekends where it's like mom and dad are getting coffee and you guys can choose a quiet activity, it cannot be loud. You can read a book. We have like a Yoto is like an audiobook that they can listen, they can color, they can do Legos, something quiet. Having said that, I just want to say, generally, up to 3 years old, kids generally still need a nap. Like I would say, if before, I mean, for sure up to 2.5, then there's could be some transition from 2.5 to 3. But I would say if they're fighting nap before that time, there's probably some need of adjustment in terms of schedule. I would say, up to that age, fighting naps probably is not a sign of them not needing to nap, but it's probably more just a developmental, battles. But then after a certain age, definitely 2.5 and up, it's okay if sometimes they don't do nap, and then consistently they're gonna start to drop a nap. But I do agree that providing some alternatives for them to sort of relax and have a little bit of a quiet time during the day, it is super duper helpful. Um, and then questions about dropping naps maybe during the weekends and not during the week. I think as we are saying, it's okay to have some flexibility to accommodate for different schedules, depending on week and weekdays. So we have one last question about the methods that we mentioned for sleep independent. We do have some resources, and I think we can probably include it. We will definitely find a way to share it, more resources in terms of independent sleep, because I think it's super helpful. And so we, as usual, time flies. We are already at the end of our session. I hope we've been able to address most of your questions. We have done our best. And thank you, Monica, always for, showing up with all your wisdom and all your, tips and tricks and experience as a mom and as a scientist. So I want to share our lucky winner for the sound and light is Maya Taylor. Congratulations. And our team will be in contact with you to, ship you an amazing Sun Delight. We hope you're going to enjoy it. And then there's going to be, other workshop and events. So, keep an eye on our community. And we're going to share the recording for this event just in case. You have missed some parts and you want to share with some friends you think are going to be it's going to be helpful for them. And having said that, thank you so much for joining. As parents, we know it's always hard to find the time, so we appreciate you being here. And have a great rest of the day. Bye bye. Bye, Monica.